Due to copyright, I can't publish many audiobooks on YouTube. At our audiobook novel service, we offer access to over 300 full novels from Pocket FM, Webnovel, Audible, Wuxia, and more, all in high-quality audio format. Each novel is available with a one-time payment only. No subscriptions, no monthly payment, and no ads. Payments via PayPal or Ko-fi. To browse the full list of available novels, message me directly on Telegram or WhatsApp, or check out our full catalog on Discord. Chapter 7:16. Letter 1. Torin's entire body turned calm upon saying the last words, his eyes growing still, and the black veins covering his body slowly starting to diminish. But even then, the madness within his gaze was all too clear. The power. It had already consumed him. But this wasn't something that Emmett hadn't expected. For he too had been consumed by the very same power. Staring at Torin, his lips slowly parted. When do you think hell begins? Emmett took a step forward, and Torin's eyes rippled. He swiped his hand. Bang! Several pillars collapsed, but Emmett remained standing. I am but a mere mirage of who I once was. I've already become someone else. Whatever you try, you won't be able to do a single thing to me. His cold voice echoed across the empty space as he took another step forward. Torin remained where he was. He couldn't move. He couldn't allow himself to move. Stepping back would mean that he feared the man before him. He feared no one. There was no one who could make him feel fear. You've still not answered me. Emmett's cold voice echoed across the hall once more. When do you think hell begins? It was just a simple question, but listening to it, Torin didn't know how to answer. Hell? He didn't even believe in hell, but he still answered. If there is a hell, I'm already living in it. Emmett smiled, his eyes looking down on Torin. He seemed amused by the answer as he grew closer to him. What's so funny? I just find it funny how you'd think what you've gone through is hell. Don't you think your life has been so much better than Noel's? If hell existed, I'm sure he's the one who has gone through it. He should be thankful for that. Torin shook his head. I would rather walk into hell than carry the burden of lifting those up from the very hell that traps them. Is that so? Emmett stopped. He stood right before Torin. The two locked eyes with each other. The room grew tense. And then, hell begins the moment the world grants you the vision to see all that you could have done, should have done, and would have done, but couldn't do, didn't have time to do, or had to wait a long time to do. The temperature dropped, and Emmett's eyes grew hollow as he stared at Torin. That is the hell that I've experienced. His soft words quietly reached Torin as his hand raised. To see all the endless possibilities. All the possible ways that I could die. That Noel dies. That the world ends. To see the suffering of those I love etched into futures I cannot determine or have no idea how to change. That is true hell. Torin wanted to swat the hand away, but he knew it was impossible. Emmett wasn't actually here, but it felt like he was. And soon, his hand pressed against his forehead. Emmett's soft voice echoed once more. You want to experience what I experienced? For the last time. Be my guest, but don't lose yourself in it. Darkness took over Torin's vision after that. The days that followed the Emperor's death were chaotic. It began with public unrest, followed by the sudden mobilization of several noble houses, forming alliances and throwing their support behind select potential successors. The movements were all done secretly, but the change was noticeable. Several prominent successors vied for the throne, each aggressively courting the most influential noble houses they could secure. Aoife was one of the successors, but she was strangely quiet. Not that it mattered. For at least until the Emperor and the Prince's funeral, the fight for the throne had to be put on pause. The succession battle hadn't begun yet, but the scent of gunpowder already hung heavy in the air. I bet the other empires are having a field day. Looking at the report in my hand, I hopped off my carriage and stretched. Looking at the estate up ahead and seeing numerous carriages parked, I understood what was happening, and I secretly groaned inside. However, I didn't show my frustration as I calmly walked toward the estate. Stop right there. But of course, getting into my own house wasn't going to be easy. Several people stopped me right before I could enter. Standing before several knights in silver armor was a man dressed rather fancily. His thick mustache that curled at the ends the most prominent feature of his. I stopped then. You are? I'm an envoy from Prince Julius Romulus Megrail. I'm here to formally invite you. Not interested. Clank. Clank. Several blades and weapons were pointed at me. I stopped and looked at them, catching a glimpse of my own reflection within the polished gleam of the weapons. Look here. The envoy spoke, his eyes narrowing and his tone becoming even more arrogant. I don't think you're fully aware of your current position. You're but a mere viscount while the prince is of the Megrail bloodline. If he calls for you, then, like I said, Not interested. How many times did I have to tell this guy before he got the message? I didn't even know who this prince was. And since I didn't know, he was most likely a bastard child. If I were to ally myself with someone, it'd have to be with the princess, not some bastard child. Now, if you would excuse me. You! I closed my eyes and opened them up again. In that moment, the faces of everyone present changed. Huh? Who are you? What's going on? I smiled at them. Hello. I'm an attendant for the household. I'm trying to get in. If you would please excuse me. I pushed myself through. None of them complained. They all just looked dazed and confused. I silently smirked to myself. This new skill does sure come in handy. Eye of existence, as expected of a primordial ranked bone. The skill that I received was a good one. Ha! Coming into the estate, I let out a large breath. The insides were rather cool, but everything was still relatively empty. Staring at the place, I felt a certain pang inside my chest. I wonder if Noel is doing okay. I still hadn't heard from him. However, I knew that the chances of him coming back were slim. The only thing I hoped for was his safety. Pressing my lips together, I looked around the place before eventually making my way towards his office. I'm not entirely sure what I'm supposed to do next, but if I search through Noel's office, I'm bound to find something. And so I did. I climbed the long flight of stairs to the second floor and made my way toward his office. Stopping in front of the large wooden door at the end of the corridor, I raised my hand to knock, only to pause. All right. He was no longer here. I sighed before reaching for the handle and opening the door. Clank. The office was exactly the same. It was clean, and everything was in place. I looked around the place before my gaze paused at his desk. It was there that I saw a letter neatly tucked under one of the books on the desk, and I couldn't help but smile at the sight of it. As expected, you did leave something behind after all. It would have been so much easier had he just told me before leaving. But Noel had always been like this. I was used to his behavior. In hindsight, he probably took this from me. I shook my head before taking the letter and opening it. I read the first sentence, and the smile was wiped away from my face. To the brother who forgot how to fall. I had to take a small pause. What is this? For some reason, I didn't want to read any further. But even though my mind said otherwise, my eyes didn't listen. They traced down the first words. Ever since our parents' death, I know you were never allowed to fall. No, you never allowed yourself to fall. You were forced to grow up faster. You took the blame even when it wasn't yours. You were the one who always knew where to go, even when you yourself were lost. My hands shook. What is this nonsense? Why is he writing this? I looked behind the letter, but there was nothing else written. I bit my lip. I really didn't want to read more. And yet, I know you've changed. It was as if Noel's voice whispered into my ears. You're not the same brother I used to know. It was soft. But you're still my brother. Warm. They called you strong. And comforting. But I see the truth. You weren't trying to be a hero. You were just trying to keep us alive. And no one knows the price you paid for that. You never cried. You never complained. You protected me regardless of the cost. Ha. I felt breathless. Why now? Somewhere along the way, your silence became your strength. But I see you. I always see you. I see the exhaustion behind your resilience. You give and give without ever asking for anything in return. You show up, even when your own heart is breaking. You stay quiet, not because you don't feel, but because you feel too much. The words seemed to strain at this point. I could see it. I could feel it. Noel's struggle as he wrote this. Why? Why was he writing something like this? No, I could tell why. This letter, it was a farewell letter. Covered my mouth. Right. It's not as if I didn't expect this. My chest started to sting. But I continued to read. Even as my heart stung, and my eyes started to blur. So hear this. I know all about the thing that you did in the mirror dimension. About how you didn't listen to my request. But you know what's funny? I never really got mad. Even the strongest deserve gentleness. You don't always have to be the anchor. You're allowed to be held too. I can't be there for you. At least not yet. But there might be a time when the two of us can be together once again. Not as Mortem and Heraclius. Not as Aldrich and Julian. But truly as Emmett and Noel. As big brother and little brother. As family. The letter ended there. I stood in silence like that. In a way, it was ironic. Before, I wanted the letter to end fast. I wanted it to be quick. And yet, staring at it in my hands, I couldn't help but reread it over and over again. It was short. This letter, it was way too short. I covered my mouth and sat down, feeling something cover my eyes, staring at the window, towards the sight Noel had grown used to staring at. I took a deep and long breath. Forgot how to fall, huh? I shook my head. If only it were true. Chapter 7:17. Letter 2. I didn't know how long I remained seated. I just allowed the silence to take over my thoughts and surroundings, basking in it for as long as I possibly could. Silence always had different meanings to me. At some points, silence signified loneliness. It signified the lack of voices around me. But after a certain point, silence became something else for me. It became a sign of peace. With all the chaos and everything that had been happening around me, the rare moments of silence became the rare moments of peace. But I wonder what it is I'm feeling right now. Was this silence loneliness? Or was this silence peace? Couldn't tell. However, it felt like a mix of both. Closing my eyes and letting the darkness take over my vision, I took several deep breaths in order to calm myself down before opening my eyes again and staring at the letter in my hands. I have no idea what you've planned, but I know that you're probably going to be away for a very long time. It wasn't like I didn't see it coming. I was ready for it. But the letter caught me off guard. It was as if I had suddenly been sucker punched by him. How annoying. Finally, a smile cracked my features. I carefully folded the letter and put it in my ring. I planned on framing it later. Hoof! I wiped my face a couple of times before looking around me. Now that Noel was gone, I needed to think of a way to excuse his absence. The logical thing to do was to pretend that he was gone on a long trip. However, that wouldn't really be believable considering the current situation with the Ivinus family. In that case, he either died or got injured. I frowned before thinking about the previous assassination attempt. That could work. The excuse of him being injured by the assassination attempt could work. At least in the short term. I knew that I wouldn't be able to keep up the excuse for very long. Not that it mattered. There were so many things that I needed to worry about at the moment. Now that my identity has been exposed, it wouldn't be strange for those of the inverted sky to come find me. And they're not just going to send people at the same level as me. Atlas, he could be the one to directly find me. And even if it isn't him, it might be the other seats. This part worried me. While I was strong, I was still nowhere near strong enough to not worry about them. If they truly did come, then there'd be nothing I'd be able to do. Unless Noel already knew this in advance and prepared something for this situation. This seemed like a plausible situation. There was no way that Noel wouldn't think that something like this would happen. Well, I can worry about this later. Although it's important, there are still a couple of more pressing matters that I need to take care of. I looked around Noel's desk before grabbing a calendar. Taking the fountain pen that rested not far from me, I circled 2 dates. Emperor funeral and rite of arms. In 2 days' time, the emperor's and the prince's funerals were going to start. Those days were going to be extremely important. Not only would those days mark the start of the succession battle, but they would also mark the last day of peace within the Nuz and Sifa Empire. I was almost certain that the other empires were going to secretly help the other candidates in the fight for the throne. This was going to be a long and bloody war. One that I needed to be extremely careful of. The rite is supposed to happen in a week's time, but it might get pushed by a few days. I still need to find some extra people for help. So far, I've got a couple of people in mind. I was a little bit worried about the rite. However, I was also quite confident in winning it. I just needed to be careful since there was a high chance some external forces could interfere in the matter. In particular, the other empires. I was really worried about this part. But it's not like they will send a monarch in the fight. That would be overkill. My best guess is that they might send a quasi-monarch in the fight. Someone who is on the verge of becoming a monarch. That will be their trump card. I need to think about a way to handle that. There was not only that, but I also needed to carefully study the Ivinus forces. By now, everyone was aware that what the Ivinus household displayed was far from their real force. Our financial power was staggering, and so were our troops. But I knew nothing of the full extent of it. That was why I planned on finding out about it now. But where exactly did he leave those files? I tapped around the desk, flipping over several dozen papers that were neatly stacked on each side of the desk. There were quite a lot of them, and just looking at them gave me a massive headache. No, wait. I paused after a moment. In hindsight, there was no way Noel would leave such sensitive files out in the open. They had to be in a safe place. I drummed my finger over the table before turning around and staring at the massive bookshelf behind me. Can it be? If there was one thing that I was aware of about Noel, it was that he had always loved spy movies when young. He especially loved things like secret rooms and stuff. And if my guesses weren't wrong, click, pulling one of the books back, a faint clicking sound echoed, and the library moved apart, giving way to a small door, one that appeared to be password protected. I didn't even say a thing. Even after so many years, he really hasn't changed. I felt both happy and sad. Of all the things that didn't change, Never mind. I looked at the password and paused. Knowing my brother well, I inputted a code into the keypad that was constructed using runes, and the door opened a few seconds later. My date of birth. As expected. Noelle was really predictable with regards to stuff like this. A small flight of stairs greeted my sight the moment the door opened, and as I looked down, the lights on the side of the walls lit up and a room soon appeared before me. The moment I crossed into the room, I paused. There were no words that truly captured the place. It wasn't massive, but it was certainly large, roughly the size of 2 tennis courts placed side by side. Stone walls enclosed the space, and tall wooden pillars rose at intervals, supporting the ceiling above. Neatly arranged desks filled the room, all containing files and documents that were neatly arranged together. Massive libraries stood by the sides of the walls at the back, all containing numerous books and files that felt like they would take forever to read. The air felt rather fresh, and besides the smell of stone that lingered around the area, the smell of the place wasn't bad. He really didn't hold back when making this place. Taking in the sight before me for the next several seconds, I eventually moved towards the desks. There were 5 in total, and each one of them had a label on it. This felt a little surprising, but then I realized something. He probably left them for me. The first table said, History. The second table said, Ivinus Household, Territory, and Worth. The third table said, Empires and their layout. The fourth table said, The 4 organizations, layout, seats and routes. And the fifth table said, Everything I know about the outer beings. Staring at the numerous files and papers on each table, and then the labels, my heart skipped a beat. This was massive. It had been a couple of days since the death of her father and brother. And yet, it still felt as though everything had happened just a few minutes ago. The haunting images lingered in her mind, preventing her from getting any sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, they returned. She'd snap them open again, heart pounding, as if that alone could keep them at bay. Aoife's gaze was blank. Her steps were slow. Before she knew it, she found herself in front of a certain room. It was her brother's room. Her gaze wandered over the room before she reached for it and opened it. Creak! The door creaked open, and his room came into view. It was finely decorated. It wasn't much different from hers, besides the massive desk that sat by the window. On it sat several bottles of medicine, neatly arranged beside picture frames. Inside them were photos of her. And him. Her heart clenched as she moved towards the desk. This was the first time she had been to his desk. Sitting in his seat, she smelt his familiar scent. The one of lavender. Her lips trembled, but no tears came out. Her tears, they had all dried up. But only the tears. The pain hadn't. In fact, it only grew stronger with each second that she passed in the room, feeling as though it was trying to rip her chest apart. This was the first time she had ever felt this much pain at once. It made her feel numb to everything. And yet, despite knowing it was bad, she couldn't stop herself. She reached for her brother's drawers and looked through all of his stuff. The more she sifted through his things, the deeper the ache grew, especially when she found the empty medicine bottles. So many of them. Dried blood hidden around file edges. Crumpled papers scattered across the desk. Each one felt like a quiet reminder of just how much pain he lived in every day. She felt her heart ache even more at the realization. And as she looked through another drawer and she took out another paper, Aoife paused. Her hollow, numb gaze wavered as it landed on the paper, a faint flicker of something breaking through the emptiness. Javinka Ward. Vote. Aoife K. Megrail. W. What? Chapter 718. Funeral 1. That's. This. Aoife's hand shook as she stared at the paper in front of her. She looked at it again, and seeing that she wasn't seeing wrong, her expression started to change. This doesn't make sense. He voted for me? But wasn't it Julian who voted for me? Wait, since he has it here, it must mean that he didn't send it. Aoife relaxed after her thoughts paused there. Yes, this makes sense. He tried to send it, but decided not to in the end. She took another breath and turned the paper around. But that was when she saw it. The words written on the back. To my dear sister, even if no one votes for you, I will. Even if you might never find out, just know that this was the only vote you received. Her hand shook, and her expression started to change. This doesn't make sense. She was sure that Julian had been the one to vote for her. Unless, he lied to me. Thinking back, this did sound like something Julian would do. He had never been the nicest of guys in the past. He was selfish. He was apathetic. He lied to me. He has to have lied to me. He lied. He lied. He lied. He lied. He lied. He lied. Aoife's thoughts started to spiral. They spiraled in a way that she felt she couldn't control. Perhaps because of everything that had happened to her recently, her mind wasn't in the right state to properly process the situation. She needed an outlet to vent, and she found the perfect one. He lied to me. Her hand slowly squeezed the vote in her hand, crumbling it in her palm as her eyes flickered. But it was also in that moment that her mind suddenly throbbed. Aoife let out a short groan as she dropped the vote and went on to clutch her head. He lied. 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 Her own voice continued to whisper loudly in her mind as her eyes started to turn bloodshot. She didn't know what was going on. Even is happening? Her eyes turned even more bloodshot as her fingers curled, trying to grasp the marble floor beneath her. And just as the pain was starting to grow even fiercer than before, her vision blanked. The world around her seemed to shift, pulsing in weird ways as she found herself hovering before a certain figure. He stood before her. He looked a little older, but that haughty and arrogant look of his, Aoife could distinctly remember. Her chest burned at the sight of him. It burned with something that was akin to resentment and anger. Kill. I need to kill him. Her hand slowly clenched as his haughty gaze fell on her. Their eyes met, and Aoife's expression distorted. But just as the tension reached its breaking point, Aoife's vision suddenly narrowed, as if she were being yanked out of a tunnel. The next thing she knew, she was stumbling backward, collapsing onto the floor. Cough! Cough! Aoife started to cough violently, feeling her hair attached to her forehead. Her chest rose and fell unevenly as she desperately tried to gasp for air. And then, what in the world was that? Aoife struggled to comprehend the situation. That vision. Those boiling emotions. What in the world was happening? Taking several more breaths, Aoife slowly turned her attention towards the glass plane that rested next to Gail's bed, positioned at an angle. She caught a glimpse of her reflection in that moment. Her hair was disheveled, her face drained of color, and both her clothes and hair clung to her sweat-soaked skin. Is that me? Aoife had already been aware of the fact that she looked horrible. She hadn't eaten for days and had hardly gotten much sleep, but she didn't know it was to this extent. She was just prepared to stand up when, "You need to kill him," a certain voice whispered in the air. Who? Aoife's head flicked upwards, towards the source of the noise. But nothing. There was no one else present in the room. Who said that? Who is here? Aoife tried to stand up, but found herself completely drained of energy. He is not someone who should be kept. You need to kill him before it's too late. The voice whispered again, and Aoife's body tensed. I said, who is it? Where are you? Show yourself. Aoife's voice grew louder as she looked around. However, she still couldn't see or sense anyone. It was just as she was about to stand up to look for the voice that her gaze fell on the mirror. In that moment, she froze. All thoughts disappeared from her mind as she stared at her own reflection. Or more precisely, the figure clinging to her back, arms wrapped tightly around her neck, head resting beside her shoulder, lips curled into a quiet, unsettling smile. You need to kill him before it's too late. All of it is his fault. He's the one who did it. He's the killer of your father and brother. Aoife's lips trembled. Not because of the words, but because of the figure that appeared. She looked older, but that was certainly herself. What are you waiting for? The voice whispered closer to her ears. Aoife's lips trembled further, and her eyes shook. Get rid of him. Get rid of the cancer that is slowly growing next to you. What was happening to her? There's so much stuff that I need to look through. I don't think I'll be able to get through everything in a day, let alone a month. The reality of just how many things were present before me started to sink in after the initial excitement died down. Seeing just how many files were in front of me, I knew that it was impossible for me to go through them quickly. To make matters worse, I really wanted to read each and every section. However, I knew that I had to prioritize things based on the current situation. As such, the first thing that I did was go to the Ivinus household section. This was probably the one that I wanted to look at the least, but considering everything that was happening, it was the most important one for me. It's also not like I don't have time to check the others later. I flipped through the first file. Financials. My eyes lit up. Maybe not everything is interesting. I licked my lips and looked through the financial data. The layout was quite well done. It was separated into different sections. From the income generated from taxes, income generated from trade, income generated from the gold mine, income gained from conflicts and so on. The file had everything, including the final sum at the end, as I sucked in a cold breath. Holy shit! The number of zeros made my head spin. So much! The amount of income that the territory managed was simply astronomical. It was something that even put all of my savings to shame. If I take into account everything that I have, including the salas that I kept from the mirror dimension in case I'd have to go back there, I have a total of around 200 million rand. That was a lot of money. And yet, it was still nothing compared to what the household made. Is this just unique to our household? Or are the other households the same? It suddenly started to make sense why Aoife and the others cared little about money. This was simply ridiculous. Or at least, this was what I thought until I saw the expenses list. Never mind. That number was also astronomical. I guess running such a large territory isn't cheap. A sharp pang hit my chest the moment I saw the numbers. My first instinct was clear. Increase taxes, cut spending. But I knew that path would ignite a storm of backlash, so I forced the thought aside. I think it's best if I don't touch this stuff. Noel has already arranged everything accordingly. He knows about this more than I. I started to look through the other files. Forces of the Ivinus household. Yet again, I sucked in a breath of cold air. It turned out that the Ivinus household had quite the force under its command. We had a total of 20,000 soldiers under our command. Of the number that were above Tier 5, there were only 200, each of which were respectively leader of their own unit. There were 2 Tier 7s and 1 Tier 8. This is a lot more than I expected. This made me think about the upcoming right. If possible, I can probably use them. But at the same time, I shook my head. A lot of these forces were stationed far away and were kept secret. It was still not time to display the full force of the Ivinus household. I could still handle things without their help. However, it felt more reassuring to know that I had backup like this. What else? I started to look through all the other files related to the Ivinus household. I immersed myself in learning all about the ins and outs of the household. From hidden allies to people that I needed to watch out for to... Wait, these are our territories? It turns out that the Ivinus household was even bigger than previously anticipated. There were several smaller territories that were officially baronies, but were in fact secretly owned by the Ivinus household. The scariest aspect of it all was that each territory was strategically placed in areas where special targets of interest were located. Staring at the map and seeing all the red circles, I couldn't help but cover my mouth. Just how much did you plan advance, Noel? I leaned back into the chair while musing over the entire situation. But then, feeling a small vibration over my communication device, I took it out and read the message. My expression changed subtly. Oh shit. I stood up from my seat and went out of the room. I needed to go quickly. I had been so immersed in my studies that I had completely lost track of time. I was about to miss the Emperor's funeral. Chapter 719. Funeral 2. I was supposed to leave at least a day in advance in order to get to Bremer. However, with everything that had happened, I ended up going the same day that the funeral was being held. Are you kidding me? You want to rob me blind? Do you know who I am? No, and I don't care. Pay up or we're not opening up the portal. I clenched my teeth and glared at the man in front of me. In the end, albeit unwillingly, I ended up handing over 200,000 rand. I felt my stomach twist as I handed the man the money, but I had no choice. This was the price I had to pay in order to not be late. Thankfully, there's a gate not far from our territory. The Ivinus household didn't have a gate set up. This was mainly due to the astronomical price that it took to set one up, and with Noel wanting to keep the finances private, he never established one. As a result, I had no choice but to run to a nearby territory and use their gate. It wasn't so hard, was it? Taking the money, the man gave me a look before turning around and motioning the workers to set up the gate. I held myself from cursing at him. Then, swoosh, the surroundings swirled as the portal formed. My clothes and hair fluttered as I stared at the massive gate in front of me. Maybe I should think about setting one up. Even though it cost a lot of money to make, it also generated a lot. Not only that, but it made traveling easier. I was starting to get tired of carriages. And it's not like we have to hold our financial power back any longer. I had been holding and saving the money in preparation for buying the crack that was in Elner. But as things stood, I probably didn't have the chance to buy it. At the very least, I wouldn't be able to buy it anytime soon. Things were going to heat up after the funeral. The last thing I'd be able to worry about is the crack. How annoying! That deviated from my plans a little, but it wasn't like I could do anything about it. I had too many things to worry about. The gate is ready. You may enter. Hearing the worker's voice, I turned my attention back towards the gate and stepped towards it. Let's handle the funeral first. I'll think of everything else later. And with that, my body faded into the portal. I made it just in time. The first thing I noticed as I stepped out of the portal was the weird atmosphere that lingered in the air. It was somber and gloomy. People walked around the streets with black clothing, and all appeared to be heading towards the royal palace. I followed behind the crowd before stopping at the gates of the palace. A lot of people were waiting outside, but only a select few were given direct access to the garden. Thankfully, I was one such person as I pushed my way through and entered the gates. I wonder how Aoife is doing. Entering the gates, it felt as though I could finally breathe again. There were a lot fewer people present. However, looking around, I could tell that everyone was an incredibly important person within the empire, many of whom I recognized. I don't see Aoife anywhere. It looks like she might come later. I scratched the side of my face. I could see Kira and Evelyn in the distance. They were both wearing black dresses, and they stood next to their parents. Looking around, I saw even more familiar figures. Primarily those that I knew from the academy. But at the same time, I was shocked to see several people that I didn't think I'd see for a while. Caius, Kalian, and even Amel. What were they doing here? Been a while. A hand tapped my shoulder and I paused. Turning back, a pair of gray eyes met my vision. Leon. MHM. Leon nodded, his face unusually serious. He wasn't different from the others. He wore all black, but at the same time, looking at him he felt different. He felt more regal. I don't think I'll ever get used to this sight. To me he was just my knight. I didn't think you'd show up here. Why wouldn't I? Although I'm now the prince of another empire, it doesn't change the fact that I was raised here. And it's also not like I am heartless to the point where I wouldn't show up when something happened to one of my closest friends. Right? He was right. I looked around. I guess those from the other empires aren't here for the same reason, no? Nope. Leon shook his head. They're here to monitor the situation. Most of them are keeping an eye on the succession candidates. Some may have already chosen sides and started to sponsor them. This is the first time that the Nuz and Sifa Empire has been so vulnerable. It's only natural that the other empires are setting their targets on the empire. You're right. The situation was extremely delicate. It was so delicate that I had no choice but to pick a side myself. If I don't pick a side and one of the candidates takes over, things can become rather troublesome for me. Let alone the inverted sky, who had likely already begun making moves to seize the throne, with the other empires now entering the fray. I knew this would be an exceptionally bloody and ruthless struggle. In order to protect my own interests, I had no choice but to join the battle. How troublesome. Just the thought made my headache worse. What about the Verdant Empire? I looked at Leon. Do they plan on interfering? I don't know. Leon shrugged. He continued before I could speak. We're already busy with our own internal matters. Even if I wanted to help, I don't have the ability or manpower to help. That being said, if the others from the Empire do plan on doing something, then I'll also try something. Naturally, we'll stand with Aoife. I see. That made a lot of sense. I was just about to say something else when, bang! The massive doors of the palace swung open, and several guards clad in gleaming silver armor stepped out. Their presence brought the surroundings to a still silence. The sheer pressure they exuded, combined with their radiant appearance, seemed to suffocate everyone nearby. The last thing I heard before they walked out was Leon's voice. It's starting. Shortly after, the sharp clank of metal echoed through the air as the guards stepped forward, holding onto two large white coffins in their grasp. They moved in solemn silence, making their way toward the center of the vast garden, while the sun cast its harsh glare upon the white coffins from above. Following the guards from behind were several figures in black. Immediately, my gaze fell on a certain figure as she walked with her head hung low, her face covered by the black veil that rested above her head. She walked in silence, following the guards as they eventually stopped at the center of the garden, where everyone could see. Clank! Placing the coffins down, the guards each took their own position beside the coffins. Everyone stood in silence as they stared at the coffins. No one said a word. No one was allowed to say a word. At this very moment, the silence was meant as a sign of respect. Respect for the emperor and the prince. But the silence didn't last for long. Eventually, a man stepped forward. He was tall and his features were quite handsome. He looked relatively young, and his piercing yellow eyes stood a stark contrast to his black hair. That's John P. Megrail, one of the most likely candidates for the throne. Leon whispered next to me. I nodded silently, already somewhat aware of this. However, I was confused about something. He's clearly not a person who comes from the main bloodline. How come he's giving a speech before Aoife? Or is it possible that she's supposed to be last? I wasn't necessarily aware of how the customs worked. Nonetheless, under the heat of the sun, I spent the next couple of hours listening to the speeches coming from all the delegates. After a certain point, I felt like dying. In all honesty, I cared nothing for the emperor or the prince. I had only met the emperor once, and the memories of that time weren't exactly the greatest. I only came here because I had to and because I wanted to check up on Aoife. How long is this supposed to last? Can I get out already? Looking to my left, my gaze met with Leon's, and with just one look, I could see that he was feeling the same. This had been dragging for far too long. I sighed. He sighed. And then, next up, Aoife K. Megrail will be giving a speech. It was finally Aoife's turn to speak, and my interest returned as I turned my head to see her walk up towards the coffins, tracing her hand over them as she turned her head towards our direction. Despite the black veil covering her face, for a brief moment, I felt her gaze wander over to me. It locked onto me for several seconds before turning away. But just subtly, I noticed a subtle twitch of her body the moment our eyes locked. It wasn't very noticeable, but I still picked up on it. Is something wrong? For whatever reason, it felt as though she was holding herself back. I was a little confused, but I didn't think too much of it. She then began her speech. Compared to the others, her speech was on the shorter side. Her tone was relatively monotone, and she kept her face hidden the entire time. In spite of this, no one judged or said anything. Everyone grieved differently. But at the same time, there was a noticeable and gradual shift in the atmosphere as she spoke. It was light at first, but it became more and more noticeable as her speech was slowly coming to a close. That is all. It only became glaring once her speech was over. It was so thick that even I struggled to ignore it. The smell. It was the smell of gunpowder. The faces of many subtly shifted, and tensions rose to an all-time high. It's starting. Leon's soft mumble reached my ears, causing me to hold my breath. The fight for the throne. It's starting. Chapter 720. Lie 1. Hearing Leon's words, I pursed my lips. He didn't need to say it for me to understand. I could just feel it. Thank you all for being here today. The Emperor and the Prince will now be laid to rest within the palace grounds. A mourning period of 5 days will be observed, during which the public may come forward to pay their respects. As the announcement was made, the crowd behind began to stir, alongside the people present within the garden. Shortly after, all of the delegates and members of the Megrail family returned to the palace. Everyone traced their movements until they finally entered. The noise returned after that. It looks like it's finally over. Leon spoke, his voice no longer a whisper as I turned to look at him. I nodded. Yeah, it looks like it. The entire event had probably lasted more than 4 hours. It was really starting to bother me. If I do end up dying one day and they hold a funeral, I'll make sure to make it longer. Just the thought of bothering people even in death sounded quite fun. Leon's eyes narrowed. I raised my brow. What? If you do end up dying again, and for real this time, I'm not staying any longer than 10 minutes. What? That's me being generous. Leon cut me off. I frowned. Then, joke's on you, I don't want you at my funeral. How the hell did he know what I was going to say? No, this isn't strange. He's always been like this. I brushed my hair back and shook my head. Looking around, I pretended to be all serious. We probably shouldn't be joking around in such a tense and sad moment. You're probably right. Yeah, who were we kidding? Neither of us cared. We were only here for Aoife, and since she wasn't here, it didn't matter. Everyone else probably also didn't care. In fact, looking around and seeing several people laughing, this became pretty obvious. Two-faced. Everyone here is two-faced. It felt as though I was in a den of snakes. I was just about to point this out to Leon when I felt a sudden tap on my shoulder. Curious. I turned around to see a man dressed in a black butler uniform standing behind me. May I help you? This was the first time I had ever seen the man, so I was a little taken aback. However, seeing him smile kindly at me shortly after, I quickly recovered. It's nothing serious. I was just told to escort you within the palace. The young princess would like to have a word with you. Aoife. Yes. The butler smiled, and I looked at Leon. Just me. Correct. Yet again I was taken aback. However, I still decided to agree to the request. I understand. I didn't think anything bad would happen even if I refused it. However, I did come here to check up on her, so this was good too. Please follow me. The butler began to escort me into the palace. I gave Leon one last look before following him into the palace. Leon didn't have much of a reaction, he just mumbled something like, "Tell me how she is later," before leaving and going to where those from his empire were. If I have to make a guess as to why she's inviting me into the palace, it must be because she wants to talk about the succession battle. She probably wants me to join her camp. This felt like the most logical reason why she'd call me. It was also why I wasn't nervous as I entered the palace and was led to the second floor, and towards a specific room. The butler and I stopped before a gigantic wooden door. Turning to face me, the butler smiled. The princess is waiting for you inside. Noted. I reached for the handle and pushed open the large wooden door, revealing the interior of an expansive, lavishly decorated room. At its center stood a grand bed draped with flowing curtains, surrounded by an array of paintings, vibrant plants, and ornate decorations that gave the space a regal, almost sacred atmosphere. Despite all the decorations, what truly caught my attention were the massive windows, pouring in brilliant sunlight as the curtains swayed gently in the breeze. And amidst that golden glow, a certain figure slowly came into view. She stood by the window, her hands behind her back as she absent-mindedly stared at the window outside. Her face was still hidden by the dark cloak that draped over her face. This is a nice place. I tried to make some small talk as the door behind me closed. But silence. Aoife didn't speak. Instead, she just slowly turned her head in my direction. I felt a wave of awkwardness as I casually looked around the place. I heard that you called for me. Is this because you want me to join your camp for the succession battle? If so, why? Aoife's voice cut through mine, causing me to stop for a moment. Turning my full attention to Aoife, I paused. Something about her voice didn't feel quite right. It was cold, and it sounded different than the Aoife that I usually knew. Is something the matter? Why? Aoife repeated, and I felt a sudden sense of déjà vu. Why what? You? Why did you lie to me? What? I looked at Aoife in confusion. Lie? What was she? Aoife suddenly tossed something in my direction, her gaze still directed away from me, and I looked down to see that it was a certain piece of paper. Although I was confused, I slowly picked up the paper and looked at it. It was in that exact moment that the face froze. You never voted for me, didn't you? It was all a lie from the start. This isn't the first time that you've lied. You've lied about the fact that you were alive despite everyone thinking you were dead. You've lied about so much. Was my acting really that shit to you? Just how much of it all was not a lie? In fact, aren't you just a lie yourself? What? That's just Riddick. Is it though? Aoife cut me off once again. She wasn't letting me have a single word. Am I really wrong? I opened my mouth, but found myself unable to speak at all. I thought about her words and realized she wasn't wrong. None of her words were wrong. I was a liar. Almost everything about me was a lie. I see. Aoife smirked beneath her veil. It was just clear enough for me to see it as she slowly turned her attention towards me. Even you know that I'm right. All you do is lie. You lie about the vote. You lie about your death. And you lie about the fact that you're Julian. I felt the breath leave my body then. That's what? You didn't think I'd know. Aoife slowly pulled the veil away from her face as she finally looked at me. The moment I caught sight of her face, my face and body tensed. Something about her didn't feel right. Her face, her expression, everything. I felt my back starting to tingle as I looked at her. I've always known. I'm sure the others are also aware. Maybe Leon was aware of it from the start. Evelyn for sure knows. I also knew. I just kept quiet about it. Not so much because you voted for me, but because I trusted you. I trusted what I saw. Aoife's voice grew colder as she looked at me. Her eyes started to change. They felt colder. They felt more detached. But the key word here is trusted. Aoife paused, her breathing growing softer. I no longer trust you. How can I trust you when all that you are is a lie? I remained silent. There wasn't much that I could say. She was right. I had indeed lied to her. About a lot of things. In fact, I was still lying to her. Nothing about who I was and what I stood for was the truth. I was nothing but a walking lie. And yet, staring at the paper before me, I managed to find my words again. You're really naive, aren't you? Oh. Aoife paused, her gaze turning dangerous. I ignored it and just stared at the paper before looking back at her. I've always known that you were naive, but I didn't think you'd be this naive. The temperature of the room rose. But yet again I ignored it. Regardless of what was happening to Aoife, she was still Aoife in my eyes. A naive yet try-hard princess. I appreciated her for how she always tried so hard in things that she wasn't very talented at. I appreciated her for how she always tried her best at anything that was put her way. I appreciated her for how naive she was. Do you seriously think that one vote makes sense to you? I looked at her. Her brows twitched. She probably knew but chose to ignore it. I pointed at the paper. One vote. Of all the possible votes that you could have gotten, you only got one vote. I pointed at the paper again before looking at her. You, the princess of an empire, admired by countless, praised for your beauty. Someone who could mesmerize an entire crowd. And you only received a single vote. I laughed then. Aoife's brows twitched further. and the coldness in her eyes receded subtly. I could tell that she was starting to understand. But I didn't stop. Do you want to know what really happened? Aoife remained quiet. However, I could tell from her expression that she was already aware of the answer. Your brother made it so that the voting was rigged. He made it so that he was the only one who voted for you. He wanted to be the only one who would vote for you. He probably was long aware of the fact that you weren't going to. Stop. Aoife's voice cut through mine. It was trembling slightly. It also no longer held the same coldness that it had held before. Whatever had previously taken over her mind was starting to fade. But I still wasn't done. I never cared to bring it up before, mostly because I was content with my own award. But the truth is, you getting just one vote never made any sense. And I know you knew it too. Still, you kept repeating it to yourself, insisting that it was just one vote. You're always like this. Despite being so confident on the outside, you hold little to no confidence in you. I said stop. Aoife's voice rose. She was practically shouting now as she looked at me. You're right. You're right. She brought her fist to her mouth and bit it. You're right. I'm just taking it out on you, all right? I knew from the start that something about it was off. No. I stopped Aoife before she could finish her words. Feeling her gaze wander back to me, I closed my eyes and sighed. You weren't wrong to get mad at me. Huh. I opened my eyes again and looked at hers. I never voted for you. I had indeed lied to you back then. Chapter 7:21. Lie 2. Chapter 7:21. Lie 2. I had the perfect opportunity to lie my way out of the situation. It was clear to both of us that the voting had been rigged. If I just said that it was her brother who had done all of this, then I could make it seem like I had, in fact, voted for her. There'd also be no way for her to truly check if I was lying or not. In the end, the situation would resolve itself like that, and everything would return to normal again. I understood that. And yet, I didn't vote for you. I still went ahead and told her the truth. Seeing the shift in her face and the rising tension in the room, I didn't regret my decision. Her previous words had made me reflect more on myself. I was a lie. Everything about me was a lie. She wasn't wrong. Knew she wasn't wrong. It was just that I had only fully grasped this concept myself after she had said it to me. Why did it take so long for me to get it? Perhaps it was because I didn't want to acknowledge it myself. Or maybe because I didn't care enough to think about it. Maybe neither are wrong. In the past, I was so hell-bent on doing anything and everything to achieve my goal. To see Noel. To see that he was safe. But now that I had met him, I no longer had the same goal. I didn't really have a goal. There were many things that I wanted to do, but no real goal. However, just because I no longer had a goal, that didn't mean that I didn't need to push forward. It didn't mean that there weren't things that I wanted. There were quite a lot of things that I wanted. And of all those things, what I wanted the most was to stop being a lie. I nodded quietly. Yeah, I lied. In a way, saying these words felt liberating. Perhaps I wasn't ready to share everything, but for the sake of myself, and to stop future misunderstandings, it was best that I came clean on certain things. I was a different person back then. I didn't really care about how people viewed me, and I didn't care about lying. I was like that. You of all people should know how I was back then. Aoife remained quiet. I didn't know what her thoughts were, but I knew that she was thinking about the past. You of all people should be aware of the fact that I'm not the same person as I was in the past. I regret lying to you back then, but I was a different person back then. I lied because I didn't care, and I'm now coming clean because I care. I looked directly at her. Our gazes met in that moment. I could see that she was truly looking at me. Let me repeat. I didn't vote for you. I indeed faked my own death, and I am indeed not the real Julian. I am a lie. I paused, feeling my breath momentarily slip away from my mouth. When I finally felt the air come back to me, I swallowed quietly before continuing. But just as much as I am a lie, I am also real. I extended both of my arms. Everything that we've gone through, from the times when I've made fun of you, to the times when you've made fun of me, to the times when the two of us acted together. None of that was fake. That was truly me, and I know you're aware of that. I may be a lie, but I've also stopped wanting to be one. Yeah, these were the right words. My head bobbed up and down unknowingly. You've asked for the truth, and I've said it. You need someone to vent your anger and resentment. Here I bang. Halfway through my words, I felt a fist smack me against the side of my face. It wasn't powerful, and it didn't hurt that much. But as I looked at the one who had given me the punch, with her head lowered and red hair covering her face, I remained standing where I was. More? Plenty more. She raised her hand again. My lip twitched. On second, though. Bang. Another fist against my face. Still didn't hurt. Okay. Let's just. Bang. She smacked me again. That one hurt. Please, STO. Bang. Another fist smacked me again. They really didn't hurt at all. I knew that she wasn't giving it her all, but I still pretended to be hurt. Because, even though she was hitting me, I could see that she was smiling with each hit that she was giving me. I quietly sighed to myself as I stared at her. I felt a massive pang of guilt when thinking about how I knew who was responsible for her father's and her brother's deaths. I wanted to come clean in that regard, but I didn't know how to. I thought about telling her about the inverted sky and how her father was just a puppet to them. And for a moment, I almost told her everything. But, bang, couldn't. Not because I didn't trust her or thought that she didn't deserve the truth, but because I knew how she was. This was also the main reason why I had never told her in the past. It wasn't because I just didn't feel like telling her, or because I wanted to be secretive. Far from it. I just knew that, from the moment I told her the truth, she'd try something stupid in her rage. From either trying to confront them directly, to perhaps even trying to join them. I have known her long enough to know, even if I were there to stop her, I couldn't be with her all the time. I couldn't be there to babysit her and make sure she didn't do something stupid. She was going to do it. I knew she was. That's why I couldn't tell her the truth. She wasn't ready for the truth. Bang! Another fist hit me on the face. This time I didn't say anything. She probably noticed it too, as her head slowly raised and our eyes met again. Her eyes were red, probably from the fact that she had just cried. I looked at her and opened my mouth. Hey, what if I were to say that your father was part of a massive cult and that he was just a puppet that my brother killed? How wow! I stopped myself. I really couldn't find it within me to tell her the truth. Better. Good. I pretended to massage my face while looking at her. In that case, I'll take my leave for now. I know that you've got a lot to think about. However, please don't take too much. Pausing by the door, I looked at her one more time. I've already got a lot of calls from the other candidates about me joining them. If you don't hurry up soon, they might just manage to hook me. I'm not a very hard man to please. I pinched my hand and made a money sign while raising my other hand. If you know that go away. Go. Tisk. Seeing her shoo me away, I clicked my tongue and opened the door. I wasn't kidding. I'm really easy to woo. With just enough money, I may just end up sleeping with any. Go! I clicked my tongue again and left the room. As I did, I couldn't help but smile. Though she tried to hide it, that smile. She couldn't hide it from me. Felt good to know that she was doing better. Really good. But the smile quickly wiped off my face. Did I really make the right decision? Should I have trusted her more? PFTT. Holding onto her mouth, Aoife tried her best to suppress her giggle. However, thinking back to what had happened, she couldn't help but find herself laughing. It felt as though a massive weight had been lifted off her chest. Indeed, she was aware of the fact that something was wrong with the vote. She had also been aware for it a long time ago that something was off. But at the same time, she also felt that the vote held a lot of truth to it. Her acting wasn't great, at least not compared to the other candidates. She was only there due to nepotism. The voices told her that she didn't deserve a single vote. The voices also told her that she was lucky to be there. The voices, liar, liar, he's a liar. Don't believe anything that he says. He's a liar. He's lying. Aoife's face flinched as the voice whispered in her mind again. She clenched her teeth and shook the voice away. Stop. Stop. Her head ached. Feeling the constant whisper in her mind, she struggled to stay standing as she sat on the bed while clutching her head. He's lying. Why did you let him go? Kill him before it's too late. Kill him before he lies to you again. No, stop. Aoife gritted her teeth. I've always known that he was a liar. This is something that I've known for a very long time. I never really cared if he lied or not. I just wanted to vent. I needed someone to take my anger on. Aoife clenched her teeth with even more force, the guilt from her actions sinking deep into her chest. I needed to be selfish, thinking about it. Her actions had been extremely selfish. Indeed, she had never cared for Julian's lies. She had known all along that he was a liar. She also knew all along that there was something wrong with the voting system. It was never the lies that bothered her. They never did. What bothered her was the world. Everything. It felt as though everything and everyone were against her. It had always felt like this to her. Be it young or old. To her, the world just seemed to be against her. It felt as if every gaze was laced with silent judgment. Like they all saw her as incompetent, naive, a failure dressed in royal silk. She managed to keep her thoughts hidden in her mind. But it all came crashing down the moment the two most important people in her life died. In that moment, she desperately needed an outlet to vent. Because, if she didn't, she was afraid she'd turn mad. And Julian just turned out to be the best outlet. It was all thanks to him that she felt better. It was now time for her to stop dwelling on the grief. At the very least, it was time for her to stop allowing the grief to take over her mind completely. You're going to regret this. Listen to me. He is dangerous. He needs to be gotten rid of. You're growing a cancer next to you. You! Silence! Aoife shouted at the top of her lungs, the voice in her head stopping. The surroundings turned quiet in that moment as Aoife stood up from the bed and took several deep breaths. Turning her attention towards the mirror that sat in the corner of the room, she looked at herself before looking back at the door. All right, she nodded. I've got this. Slapping her cheeks, she moved towards the door. Chapter 7:22. Lie 3. Even as I left the room on a good note, I couldn't help but feel a sinking feeling wash over me as I walked away from the place. Something about Aoife felt off. I couldn't quite place it into words, but for a moment there, she almost felt like an entirely different person. It was almost as if she were possessed or something. No, that's not quite right. I shook my head. It was certainly Aoife. I could tell. However, there seemed to be something a little extra in there. Something more sinister. Am I imagining things? Or is this all because of all the pent-up stress that she's experienced from the current situation? I really wanted to believe that it was the latter. However, a sinking feeling told me that things weren't so simple. It was also then that I was reminded of something that I hadn't thought of for quite some time. The calamity meter. Now that I no longer had my original blood with me, I couldn't tell the percentage of each of the 3 calamities. I still wasn't sure as to what the calamities were. It had been about 3 years since I had come to this world, and even then, I still knew nothing about that meter. Fuck. I should have asked Noel when I had the chance. Would he even know? No, never mind. I'm sure he has left most of his knowledge in the basement. I'll just have to check the basement out and see if there's some sort of answer. I had grown complacent with regard to the calamity meter. I had been so focused on other things that I completely forgot about it. It wasn't without reason. There really were a lot of things that I needed to handle. And the situation was under control. At least it was. Now that I no longer had the meter with me, I couldn't tell what their percentage was or whether it had increased or not. I'm sure it has increased, but by how much? I grew a little anxious. The thought of not knowing made me anxious. However, I knew that I needed to be calmer. Anxiety was a useless feeling. I needed to assess the situation. Noel said that I'd get my blood back soon, but when will that be? It had already been quite some time since I had returned from the mirror dimension, and I had yet to hear any news regarding Jackal and my blood. I had asked Noel about the situation, but all he answered me with was, in due time. You don't need to worry too much. You'll know when it is time for you to get your blood back. For now, just relax and train. I quietly pursed my lips and walked down the empty hall of the palace. As I did, my steps slowed down. Ah, right. I suddenly thought about Leon. He was finally back at the Empire. There was something that I needed from him. The chalice. I had now collected 3 of the 4 relics. The only one that was missing was the chalice, which Leon was in possession of. Although I still don't understand what will happen once I collect all 4, Noel said that the moment I collect all of them, I'll be able to remember everything. That seemed like the most important thing at the moment. My steps unconsciously moved faster. I navigated down the halls of the palace before finding the exit and walking out. The sun was still scorching outside, and as I looked around, I could see that a lot of people were still present. They were most likely socializing, but upon closer look, I could see that the groups were divided into several large ones. These were most likely the factions that represented the candidates for the throne. There was also a separate group for those belonging to those outside of the Empire. I quickly spotted Leon. He was talking to Evelyn and Kira. I was just about to move in his direction when a hand pressed against my shoulder. Please wait a moment. HM? I slowly turned my head to see a familiar face. With jet black hair and piercing yellow eyes, he looked rather dashing. He had a calm expression on his face as he smiled kindly in my direction. It had to be said, but those from the Megrail bloodline really did have nice appearances. Your Royal Highness, it's an honor to meet you. I bowed my head slightly in greeting. This was an etiquette that I had to follow regardless of faction. Haha, there's no need for such stiff greeting. The prince laughed before pushing his hand up. I am just a bastard child. There's no need to greet me with such stiffness. Even if that is the case, I must do so. I really wanted to rinse my mouth at the moment. I felt disgusted by my own words. All that etiquette studying did pay off in the end, I guess. Had it been the old me, I would have probably said something like, "Oh, nice. Good for you," and have walked off. That would have probably gotten me in a lot of trouble. I had improved my ways. Regardless, I really just wanted to leave. This prince, there was something about him that made me uncomfortable. Well, since you insist, then it would be rude of me to stop you. He just felt like a snake. Yeah, that's what it is. From his well-put kind expression and smiling face, to his subtly closed eyes, I felt my body tense with caution. I really wanted to use the 5th level of emotive magic to see his emotions, but I held back, knowing that the place was filled with incredibly powerful figures. If someone detected something from me, I wouldn't know when my head detached itself from my body. It's great that you're quick to understand things. The prince smiled at me before turning his attention towards the distance. I was prepared to leave when he spoke again. I heard that you're about to participate in a rite of arms. Indeed, I am. How are your preparations for that? I'm doing as well as I can. This snake, I could tell that he was trying to probe me. Not only that, but if I had to take a guess, he was probably on the Marquis' side. That's good to hear. He looked back at me. Our gazes met. It would be such a pity if someone as talented as you got hurt. When the time comes, I'll try my best to help you out. This was all he said before turning around and leaving. I stood on the spot for several seconds before pursing my lips. This guy. I wasn't stupid. I understood the meaning behind his words. He was obviously saying that I was going to lose, and when that did happen, he'd help me out so that I would at least be able to remain standing. I didn't even feel like addressing his nonsense. Secretly shaking my head, I turned around and headed towards the others. But at the same time, I made a mental note to myself. I'll check Noel's notes later. This is the first time I'm hearing of someone like him. Something felt fishy. How was the discussion? Did everything go well? The others noticed me pretty quickly as I made my way towards them. As I approached them, I tried my best to look as lighthearted as possible. I was sure that Aoife wouldn't want the others to be worried about her. I looked around me. I could see Kira, Evelyn, and Leon. In the distance, I also noticed Amel, Kalian, Agatha, and Caius. They were all with their respective empires. There was pretty much everyone that I knew. I didn't think I'd see them all at once so quickly. Is Aoife doing okay? I tried messaging her, but she hasn't responded to me at all. She's doing fine. I reassured both Kira and Evelyn as they looked somewhat worried. Really? Kira raised her brow while looking at me, and I nodded. Yeah, she's fine. If you contact her now, I'm pretty sure she might answer. Really? Kira looked at me in doubt. In the end, with a light shrug and a soft whelp, let's give it a try. She took out her communication device and sent a message. Once she was done, she looked at me. Let's see if why. She received an answer almost immediately. Oh. Kira looked rather surprised as she looked at the message. However, it was also in that moment that I saw her fluctuate. In the end, she put the communication device down and pursed her lips. She's doing fine, so she said, but looking at her expression, it didn't seem like it. What did she say? Even Evelyn was curious as she leaned her head forward to stare at the communication device. But, wait, let me see. No, stop. Kira quickly pushed her head away. Her efforts were clearly weak, as Evelyn managed to get the device not long after. She then proceeded to read the message. I was doing fine until you messaged me. Thank you. Evelyn's face grew stoic. So did Kira's as Evelyn walked back to Kira and placed the communication device in Kira's pocket before patting her thigh. There. Kira bit her lips. She was probably trying her best not to attack Evelyn. In the meantime, I looked at Leon. What are you still doing here? Aren't you going to go with your people? My people? Leon gave me a questioning look. I tilted my head. Aren't they your people? I mean, yeah. But the way that you... Nice. I cut Leon off before he could start explaining. I wasn't interested. Leon's gaze turned cold, but I ignored it. Anyways, you still haven't told me why you're here. I can see that they're going to be leaving soon. I'm not leaving. Huh. I blinked slowly while looking at Leon. You aren't? No. He shook his head. I've got a couple of things that I need to handle, and there's a recent rite that I have to attend as well. I blinked yet again. The cogs of my brain processed, and the light bulb in my head lit up. You're going to be one of my representatives? Yes. I lowered my head for a moment before covering my mouth. Are you touched? Despite everything, I was raised by the Ivinus household. It's only right that I help them out when... Okay, good. I clapped my hands in satisfaction. This was great news. Not only because then I'd be able to ask for the chalice in a more appropriate setting, but because Leon was quite capable. Perhaps taken aback by my enthusiasm, Leon's eyes narrowed with suspicion as he took a step back. All of a sudden, I'm not feeling this anymore. It's too late now. I stopped Leon before he could leave. Staring at him, I smiled. Welcome back, my useless knight. If you want access to fast updates or the full novel in high-quality audio, contact me now and bye. I offer over 300 complete audiobooks from Pocket FM, Webnovel, Audible, and more. No locked episodes, no subscriptions, just one-time payment via PayPal or Ko-fi. Message me directly on Telegram or WhatsApp, or check out the full list of available novels on Discord. Start listening to your next favorite audiobook today.